Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the All Words Free podcast. So it might sound a little different because I'm in a different room, but that's fine. And today, it's a very special episode. I'm with my friend Yax, or whatever you guys. So yeah, would you just want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello, I'm Yax. I have had the joy of knowing Lily for going on 4 years now. We do biochem together at Oxford, so I'm a fourth year. Doing research, doing like my master's thesis research at the moment.
Sounds very impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, that's me. I don't know what else.
No, that's fine. Yeah. So yeah, today the reason that you're here. This episode we're going to talk about like more sciencey stuff and science communication in general. I've like mentioned before the kind of like science journalism's like something I like might want to go into. You know, we've got all the different types of writing on my repertoire.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I haven't actually done many like very core science things, so I think it'd be nice to kind of do something like that, just a little bit of a chat. And yeah, so I guess we'll start with just kind of like our connections to science journalism in general. So go ahead. You
Me first?
Yeah.
Okay. I've always really just like enjoyed science communication. I think it began because when I was at school, I was super lucky and just happened to have this one physics teacher who he was like kind of affiliated with this uni in Bristol, not Bristol Uni, different uni, but he was affiliated with that, and he basically ran this science outreach team at my school. So we would do really cool stuff with liquid nitrogen, and we would do like superconductor stuff, magnetism stuff with liquid nitrogen, and we'd like go to primary schools and science festivals around like southwest England. And it was just so fun, like presenting and like seeing little kids like year 5's faces light up when I would like do this cool science experiment. And I think that's like how it began, but it's definitely like grown obviously while I've been here at Oxford, because me and Lily, I don't know how much you've mentioned, but like obviously we do a lot of stuff with the Oxford Scientist magazine, little shout out.
I've got a little link there, references.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, so I've been like a sub-editor there for a while, and then just have kind of moved around a bunch of different editing roles. Like I did print editor for a bit, web editor as well, and now editor-in-chief. So now it's definitely like a really big part of my life, and I'm really enjoying it. So yeah.
And yeah, no, that's a really actually nice story. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't think I've talked about it much.
No, it's really cute. It's nice to kind of, I don't know, especially I think like when you said about children, it's like, I think for me like science journalism kind of starts in the way of like, you know, reading the popular like science magazines with like grandparents and whatever. And I think like there is always a certain like, I don't know, event or person or whatever that kind of draws you into to something. So that was a really sweet story.
Thank you.
And like just science in general, why do you think like sharing it is so important, and to what degree as well? Because obviously you can get quite technical or quite kind of I don't know, showy side, I suppose.
Yeah. I think it's super important to talk about science. Like I always have, and I think I always will, just because like science kind of is everything. Like everything around us like has some sort of aspect of science to it. And I have a lot of humanities friends from home who like really don't care about science. But I think like even then hearing what they're interested in, like whether it be like they're really into books and they really enjoy reading, like even with that there's science behind that, like how is the paper made, like what, like where does ink come from, you know, like all this kind of thing. And I think like that in itself, like just how innate like science is to everything, means it's like really important to talk about and share. And then obviously there's like this whole other side of it where like it's just important to understand science from like safety perspectives, like a kind of like a level of understanding of like what we're putting into our bodies and like what happens when you're at the doctor, like stuff like that. Yeah, I think it's super important, and I agree, like there's a level where you can like over explain science, and I think that's not necessary, and I think that's where like a lot of problems with accessibility and like fear mongering and stuff like that begin, because like not everyone is gonna be obsessed with science in the way that like biochemists are, for example. Like not everyone's gonna want to know like which exact amino acid needs to be mutated for what. But I think like a baseline level of understanding is super important, and like I think every part of science can be made interesting enough to a general population. So like everyone likes to share what they love, and I think that's just like why I like to do it. But yeah.
Oh, I like that. Everyone likes, you know, everyone wants to shout what they love.
Yeah. I think science is one of those that like really gets hated on for like people sharing.
Yes, because I think that there's always, like, I think less so now. I think definitely since COVID, the kind of general knowledge of, the general public knowledge of science has definitely increased. I think just from kind of a necessity point of view.
Yeah.
I think like not treating the public like they're like incapable of understanding as well.
Yeah.
I think that's always really important.
Yeah. But like, say like people that like study English and really enjoy reading, like they get so like praised for talking about what they love. And like I feel like with science, people are always like, oh, you're like talking down to us, or like, like, oh, you're so geeky, like you don't need to know that. But like, and what? Like you don't need to know a lot of things, but like.
This is true. I feel like pursuing it for the I think science is seen as this kind of almost unnatural pursuit, whereas something like the arts and whatever, I'm thinking like, you know, a la kind of Dead Poet Society, a la like emotion and all that sort of a very kind of everyday, visible, like I feel this, I'm doing this, it's very kind of humanities in the way of like, you know, reading is affiliated with like enjoyment and like whatever, whereas science is very much linked to like study and work and it's exactly. Kind of got that image of it being, I mean, kind of elitist in a way.
Yeah. Which in many ways it is.
Which in a lot of ways it is. But yeah, I think it's important because, you know, humanities have that side to it as well where it's quite, I'm trying to think of the right kind of tone. But you know, you have the quite kind of exclusionary circles of it being like, I want to look into this novel and see all these little themes and instead of just like reading a book to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And yeah, while science is very kind of technical, I think it's sad to see this sort of image of it of the very exclusionary kind of, you've got to be a particular sort of person to enjoy it, or you can't enjoy it if you haven't had the certain type of education or whatever. Which is why things like the Oxford Scientist or like, you know, just science magazines in general, they are for everyone.
Yeah, definitely.
Even if you don't, you know, strictly do like a STEM degree or whatever.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I think I like the little puzzles and everything they do as well, because I think it's like very, I don't know, it draws you in, especially for like young people and children and whatever. And me, I did a jigsaw and while I was waiting for something to fall. But yeah, about like a science piece in general, what do you think like allows something to be accessible, or like what's important like to include sort of thing?
I think the main thing with science writing is jargon, to be honest. Like I think that is kind of the big thing. Like if you read one of my undergrad essays as a general audience, you probably would have no idea what it means, but like that doesn't mean that it's inherently a topic that's too hard, air quotes on that, for the general population to understand. It's just like written in a way that's not accessible. So like say like transcription, I don't know, that's such a random example, but like you know, you could write about that in such a niche specialist way with like massive words which like are not necessary for just conveying like a general point across. And you can summarize that in like a simple sentence with words that you kind of use in everyday language. So yeah, jargon's a massive thing. I think another like amazing way of making science accessible is analogies, because it's really difficult, and like I've always found it quite difficult to visualize what is being talked about when the thing that's being written about is like smaller than the tip of a needle or like bigger than the planet, and we can't even like conceptualize the size of it. I think that makes things just like inherently infinitely more difficult to understand. So if you can kind of take a concept and like place it into something that people see in their day-to-day life, like obviously that will make it a lot more digestible, and I think it makes it more interesting as well, like seeing kind of mirrors between scientific principles that happen because of like these really fundamental laws like entropy and stuff like that, and like seeing how things that we've created as humans like mirror that is like really interesting as well, I think. So yeah, those are kind of like the two main things I'd say.
No, yeah, I agree. I think you had like about making kind of written in an accessible way versus a non-accessible way when you're talking about the same thing. That's really interesting, and like yeah, I think a kind of one of the best qualities of a good scientist is to be able to talk to anyone about it.
Yeah, I agree.
And kind of gauge that audience, which I guess, you know, from like an education level for, you know, 6-year-olds to 16 or whatever, and just generally. Do you think there's any negative sides of general public knowledge of certain things?
Of certain scientific things?
Yeah. Or the depth of a subject or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I would assume so. Like, there's negatives to most things, I would say. And I think, like, the negative is when people think they know more than experts, and that means that their opinion kind of, like, overrides what is being suggested, like, advice that's being given to them. And I know that's, like, kind of a difficult point, because I think it comes from, like, a position of privilege to be able to be like, I trust that an expert understands more than me. Like, that comes from privilege in the sense of, like, I've never been mistreated by a professional, say like a doctor. Like, I've been lucky enough that, like, I've never been mistreated by a doctor, so, like, of course I would trust a doctor. Or, like, it comes from privilege of, like, I have quite a high level of education, so, like, I understand what experts are likely to understand, and therefore I trust them. So, like, I think this is, like, a really difficult point. But yeah, I think there is a danger of the public when there's, like, kind of too much knowledge out there. Like, I think, like, COVID is a really great example of this. Like, suddenly it felt like, maybe I'm biased, I work in an RNA therapeutics lab right now, so maybe I'm biased, but there was a point where it felt like genuinely everyone thought they were, like, RNA experts, I feel like. Which, like, is completely understandable. Like, there was so much being spoken about RNA, so it makes sense. And, like, I think in times when so little is understood and, like, people are scared and people just want clarity. Exactly. Yeah. You just cling on to, like, every kind of piece of information, which is so fair. But yeah, I think that is a danger. And I think there's also a danger, obviously, of like, false information being leaked to begin with, and then, like, the public very rightfully trusting in information that isn't true. So I think those are, like, the main issues with it. But I think, like, beyond that, there's no issue with the public understanding science.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's nice to kind of, I mean, you know, there are, like, science books and whatever out there, and the magazines and things, so it's nice to kind of, you know, I'm all for, like, gaining knowledge. It's nice to allow people to kind of pursue whatever they want to, no matter what their, you know, particular job is or what other things they like to do. Yeah, I the kind of negative side in the way that, it's nice for the public, I think, to have a wider knowledge, especially when, like, medicine and things are concerned, especially since, you know, like you're saying about, there have been cases where, you know, doctors have, say, taken advantage of their position and things like that, and it's kind of good for patients to, just from a very scientific perspective and not from, like, a bodily autonomy perspective, but to kind of have that knowledge so that they can understand what's going on in their bodies, almost as, you know, just as well as the doctor does. I think, it's I think especially now with the whole, like, you know, microbiome thing and just kind of better understanding of disease in general and the wealth of information that's out there and articles and everything. It's, you know, TV chat shows and whatever, especially around COVID, you know, RNA was definitely going about, and I was like, oh, I don't know. But yeah, I think there is definitely that value in it, but there's obviously the other side as well, especially when people use things for, you know, science and politics are very steeply intertwined. And, you know, when people use a little bit of information to kind of lead a point or drive a point, and it's, I don't know. But it's the same with anything.
I agree. Yeah, it's definitely the same with everything. Yeah,
I don't know. But, because, I mean, you know, science is so multifaceted. I guess we can talk about maths as well.
Yeah, like computing.
Computing, massive. I mean, you know, used for good or ill, but it's a lot of value in it. And like you say, like, science is in our everyday lives, like, constantly. So, I mean, for us, obviously.
Science is definitely in my everyday.
But generally as well.
Yeah, I agree.
What have you personally found the most valuable about, like, science and, like, studying it, but also getting involved in that kind of outreach and communication and that sort of thing?
Yeah, studying it definitely is just purely the fact that I love it, I think. Like, is, like, truly the only, like, I guess you could talk about, like, job prospects and stuff like that, but like, I'm planning on doing a DPhil, which again is just like studying it again. So I've just really enjoyed it, and I think that kind of ties in well to what I've gained from science communication and, like, being involved in that sphere at Oxford and, like, at uni, is just because I love it so much, like feeling like I get to share that with other people has just been really nice. And meeting people who, I think with science it's interesting because I find that there's like a massive range of types of people that study STEM, and like
100%.
you can study STEM in so many different ways. And like I know there's this stereotype of this like massive introvert who like just sits at their computer every day, which like they very much exist and like completely valid way of being a STEM student. But I've never really identified with that, I think, just as a lot of people that I know.
Yeah,
like,
the stereotype's typically a man as well.
Yes, exactly. It's usually a white man.
And usually a white man.
Yes. Usually quite an introverted white man, which I'm sure historically has been quite accurate, but like is definitely not the case now. Yeah, I think science communication is nice because it's science, 100%, but it's very social, and it's like the whole point of it is to interact with other people and like to communicate. It's kind of in the name. So it's been nice to meet other people who really love science, but who are really social and like maybe like more of the culture side of science, or just stuff like that. It's nice to see different perspectives on science, I think, other than just like numbers and graphs, which like is what science is often made out to sound like that's the whole of science, when it's really not. Like that's very much not the case, I think.
It's just one part of it.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's been nice. What about you?
Yeah, so I was going to say anyway. No, I think it's very similar. From studying science itself, I just love knowing things, which sounds really like, farcical, but I do really like just like gaining knowledge. I always have done. I've always liked, reading things and ingesting everything I can. University Challenge is my dream. But training all my life. But I think, science in particular, especially university, I think it was nice to, I didn't study biology A-level, and like coming into it, it's like the amount that I've learned over the 3 years.
It's insane.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But I think, you're developing as a person as well as learning a lot like within your field. And so it really does. It's funny, it's like you're acquiring this like knowledge of science, but you're also changing. So it's almost like they develop alongside each other. So you become this like well-rounded scientist by the time you get to your 4th year. And doing the project, it's so interesting to see that kind of behind the scenes. You spend all those 3 years like reading like proper scientific papers, which again are very much for the scientific audience, and so it's a different like side to that communication, like with all the jargon or just how it's written and interpreting graphs. And I think it's really interesting to see that kind of behind the scenes, because it's just like it's meetings, it's people going out for lunch together.
Exactly, yeah.
It's having a laugh in the lab, it's people going, oh, it'll do, and just putting something in a tube, or it's people discussing their ideas, it's presentations where people are talking about kind of what they've been doing and sort of proposals they have, and showing this exciting data, stuff that hasn't been published. The graph that goes behind getting a paper out there, it's crazy, and the amount of back and forth you have to do with like, through the review stages. And I don't know, I think once you're actually in there, it's not as kind of strict isn't the right word, but like it's not as kind of rigid as you expect it to be.
It's very free form. Like I think the quote that always springs to mind when I think about this is like people sometimes describe their mums, for example, and they're like, oh, sometimes I remember that like my mum's living life for the first time as well. And that's how I feel about like PIs. What does PI stand for again? Principal investigator. So like the big guns of a lab, in case you don't know, like the structure of a lab. But like sometimes I think about PIs and I realise that like they're researching this for the first time as well, like this specific thing. Obviously they're experts in the field, but that specific thing. So they'll just sometimes be like, oh, why don't you just like try it at a lower temperature? Like really obvious things, which I'm sure in like 20 years will feel really natural to me to come up with. But because they're experts in their field, they come up with these things so easily, but like what they're actually asking us to change like really isn't that complex, if you know what I mean. Like there's a lot of fine tuning and ideas that aren't necessarily backed by like loads of evidence. It's just kind of like, oh, why don't you try this? And sometimes it will click and it works and great. Sometimes it doesn't and you just have to keep trying again. But like it's not just a case of like, here's a protocol, follow it to the dot, do it. That's not exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think, like, you know, when you come up in first year or like second year and you're doing things yourself, you see yourself as like a normal person, quote unquote. Your friends as your friends, and you know them as a fully rounded person. And when you first step into that lab environment, you see like the PI, and you're like, oh my god, they've done all this stuff. They've lived, you know, they've gone through all these steps, or you know, the PhD students or the postdocs who like seem to know everything.
Yeah.
And then you're there like, oh, da, da, da. But the first years are going to be looking at you as a master's student, thinking, oh my god, they like know so much more than me. And I find this in every kind of field, to be honest. Like, you know, it could be a novelist, it could be a singer or an actor or a, you know, scientist or anyone. You kind of forget that people are just people trying to work it all out when you see them as the PI or the CEO or Beyonce or whatever. And
same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's strange. It's almost like, obviously not in the PI case, but like people become like their image, and you don't kind of see what's behind that. And so yeah, I think especially with science, it's nice to kind of talk about that sort of thing and like let people know that it's like, well, these people who are like, you know, you see them as like impeccably intelligent, which they are, but they also like to watch EastEnders on a whatever night, I don't know when it's on. but you know, they're just people too. And they like, you know, pizza on a Friday in the pub.
Like me too.
Yeah,
they're the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's nice to kind of remember that.
Yeah,
I guess.
I agree.
But yeah, I mean, you know, editor-in-chief for the Oxford Scientist. I remember when I first started. You know, as a sub-editor, and you can see like the senior team. Like, oh my god, and then. You know,
it's
one is there, and it's So, editor-in-chief, what's the next step? Do you think like science journalism? What's going to happen? You know, say ideal world, DPhil, you're here, you're living, you're studying. Where's the axe going to go? The IC forever.
My issue is I cannot see myself like not doing either of these two things.
Right.
So like. Yeah, especially having been in the lab now, like including my summer project for like coming up to 3 months. I literally like, I'm having the best time. I cannot imagine not doing this. Like I love the, like honestly, if I had to sum up science into like one sentence of like what is science, I would just say it's like the process of like having an idea, selecting the right method to deal with the idea, like having an outcome, like evaluating the outcome, like that process. You can apply that to like any type of science, I think. Yeah. I guess that's just what like the scientific process is. But I love that, and like I think research is really the only thing that truly like gets you that whole pipeline of like idea, action, evaluate, like optimize, make it better, do it again, get your own outcome, and like have your own part in this massive project or your own project even. So I can't see myself ever giving that up. But at the same time, I can't see myself not doing something that's creative, as in like the true sense of the word creative, because like science is creative in a lot of ways, but something that's more kind of like artistic and more like expression, like involves more expression, I think.
Like a writing.
Exactly. And even like the art and stuff that comes along with science communication and like the speaking that comes along. I really enjoy public speaking and stuff like that as well. So I think like having to give that up is also really sad. So I don't really know what the future holds. Like ideally I'd do both. And I think it's possible to do both. Like this could be, science communication could be a side hustle kind of thing for me. Yeah. But yeah, I think both will definitely be in my future, hopefully, is like all I really know right now. But yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I'm very much in the same boat. Yeah, I don't know. I think that it's quite funny. I think we're very, very similar in what we like and what we want to do. Like, there's obviously different in that way, but like career-wise,
yeah, I think we are really similar.
I think we kind of click on that same path. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's kind of like, I think, you know, some people have like one idea and that's what they want to do, and like, you know, props to them and like very steady. And then there's other people who kind of want to do a little bit of everything. Yeah. And while it's all scientific, at least I feel, I mean, I don't know whether you like think of yourself in the same way, but kind of that I want to have that little snippet of all these little bits, because I feel like if I'm just doing the one thing, I'm going to miss the other.
Exactly. Yeah.
And yeah, I like core science. I love it, and for the very same reasons. Like, you know, you can come up with an idea and test it, and like if it doesn't work, then you kind of have to think again. And it's that kind of,
it's almost like ritualistic, I think.
It is,
yeah,
in a way, yeah, definitely. And I think it is creative in that way of like you have to think of a new idea, a new proposal. And yeah, it's truly wonderful for that. And in the same way, something like science communication, I have always loved writing, and I think that kind of being able to carry that on through the lens of science is a really kind of lovely thing. So to kind of elaborate on the whole Oxford scientist thing, because I haven't really talked about it that much before. Since you're my superior,
for now,
I'm gonna give you the job of explaining. I mean, you have to explain everything, but kind of just.
Shall I give them the sub-editor training?
Yeah, right now. So, like, what is the Oxford Scientist? Why did you join? Why do you like it?
Okay. So, the Oxford Scientist is the University of Oxford's independent, student-led science magazine. It's wonderful. It has a website, so there's like a whole web kind of section to it, and it also produces a termly print magazine, which I think is really nice. It encompasses a lot of different perspectives on science. I think it has a news section, opinion, features, culture, and we're making a blog section as well. This is all on the web. So yeah, that like encompasses a massive range of different ways of talking about science, like current science, like longer think piece kind of style pieces, and also culture is really interesting as well. Like lots of discussions about like science fiction and stuff like that as well, which is really cool and quite rare, I think. And yeah, the print, so we make a magazine every term, and it's stunning, I would say.
It's
personally.
Yeah.
It's very pretty, lots of lovely artwork and amazing writing, obviously. I got involved in second year. So you can be like a bunch of different types of editor. You can be like a sub-editor, which is kind of how you start, and then you become a section editor, and then there's deputy editor, editor-in-chief. But there's like so many ways of getting involved.
It's very accessible.
Yeah, it is. So there's a lot of like non-editorial roles, like if you're more interested in marketing, there's like social media roles, or like business manager roles, creative director roles, and things like that. So it's just like a really nice way for students here to get involved in science in a different capacity, whether that be through writing and editing, or like through a completely separate lens. If they have like completely no science background, for example, like they can still get involved. Which is really nice.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things I really, really like. It's like, you know, I mean, obviously, like, hi, I'm, you know, people introducing themselves like, hi, I'm X and I study maths or biology or da. But then it's really nice to kind of get to know people who, you know, have people on the team who's like, oh, I study history. Yeah. And it's like, it's nice to kind of see that kind of crossing interest. Because I think the whole kind of, you are humanities or you are STEM, like, as time passes, it's kind of like, I don't think that's really a thing. No. I think there's a lot of overlap between people's interests.
Yeah, I think the UK is really bad for it as well. I think the concept of having to pick A-levels at 18 and then you're like boxed into either. I mean, some people pick really well and they manage to kind of like stay neatly in the middle of a humanities and STEM person, but like a lot of the people that get involved with the Oxford Scientist as maybe in like a creative role or as a writer and things like this, they tend to be people that ended up picking a history degree, say, but they did history, English and biology at A-level and they just like really missed doing biology and stuff like that. So yeah, the UK definitely kind of funnels people into picking really early, and I think having something like the Oxford Scientist at uni where you can kind of like get out of that box that you've had to place yourself into is really nice. So yeah, I agree. Yeah,
university's definitely been quite, I mean, it is quite a freeing place in the way that kind of, you're still in the system of course, but it's like you've had that license to make a choice more.
Yeah.
Which is, it's nice. It's really nice. But you've never been a section editor.
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
No.
You've
I admitted
print.
that in the meeting the other week. Yeah. But I've never been. No.
Do you because the role of EIC, when does that last until?
The end of term.
The end of term.
Yeah.
The end of this term.
You're up.
The end of this term.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh god.
When did you think you were going to do it?
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
Of course, that makes sense, doesn't it? Bloody hell. We'd have to do all the magazine runs.
Yeah.
But so what's next?
What's next?
Do you think you'll delve back more into writing?
Or? Oh, like in the near future, like next term?
Yeah, like
like
when you're 40, what's going to be happening?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I definitely want to do more writing.
Yeah.
It's being EIC, just kind of the last few terms of being involved with Oxide has taken up so much time. It's been so much fun, but it has taken up so much time. So writing has been like so on the back burner. Even editing, like I barely edit pieces actively anymore. Honestly, like going back to my roots and being a sub-editor sounds quite nice.
Yeah.
Definitely writing more. I have like quite a lot of... No, I was going to start saying I have a lot of ideas for cool pieces. I can't actually reel them off the top of my head, but like I know deep down in somewhere in here I've got ideas.
There's like there's possibility of really cool pieces.
Yeah, so I definitely want to like delve into that a bit more. Maybe start my own ventures in science communication.
Yeah.
Or maybe just kind of explore like other types of science communication, because I've really wanted to volunteer in like a science museum recently.
Nice. Cool.
Because that is kind of where my love of science communication started, is like I was saying with my physics teacher, like is like kids and like talking to kids about science, and like it just sounds so fun, and it's definitely something I want to get back into, but I just simply do not have the time right now to like go to the science museum on a Saturday morning. So that's probably the next thing that I want to do. But yeah.
That's really, really cool. No, that's really nice. Because there is a different thing about obviously like being involved in, say, a magazine and then actually being there like face to face.
Exactly.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
I think like the kind of TED style talk, for want of a better way of saying it, is like something I really kind of will be interested in. I think, like yourself, is that kind of public speaking.
Oh, I'd love to give a TED talk.
I would really love it. And like, yeah, I think even in the past kind of like few weeks since starting the kind of masters year, it's very like, I don't know, I feel like my confidence in science, but also that kind of will to share it and to do talks like that is like skyrocketed. It's crazy.
Yeah, I feel that too.
Yeah. But it's nice. I don't know, I feel like maybe this year you're kind of allowed to be a bit more like, I don't know, like innovative, part of a team. You're taken more seriously, maybe.
Yeah, definitely more seriously.
The kind of power balance has shifted, I suppose, in a way. But no, that's always really nice. What sort of pieces do you have in that, or like what sort of pieces do you really like writing? Like a particular topic, or?
I really enjoy. Well, culture is definitely a section that I feel very strongly about, very passionately about. One of our current culture editors, Catherine, she like often tells me about pieces that she wants to write in the near future, and they just sound so interesting. Like she's telling me about, she wants to write a piece about how our kind of fears surrounding science have manifested into the way that villains are created in fantasy and science fiction, which is just such a wonderful, beautiful idea.
That's so good.
Because like Frankenstein is based on like fear-mongering around vaccines, basically, and how like injecting a vaccine kind of turns you into this like other, this monster, this like alien, all this kind of thing. So it was initially apparently written as a way of scaring people out of vaccination, apparently, which is interesting. Yeah, apparently. She sent me like a really cool snippet of describing this whole thing, but
do you think that's a modern take on it though?
It could be, yeah.
Like a
Yeah.
My Shelley, like the little like Shelley section of my brain's kind of whirring.
Yeah, I think pieces like that.
But I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, the we were talking about it the other day with Catherine, right? That kind of like eugenics kind of thread to a lot of horror.
Oh wait, it's Dracula, not
Dracula.
Frankenstein. That makes more sense. I was like,
That
the
does make
timeline's a bit
sense.
off as well, of like when vaccination. Yeah, that makes more sense. But like, this is just such a great.
It's a really, really interesting thing, yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
And that's cool though. I never thought of like,
Yeah, it's very.
It's like injecting. Well, it is, isn't it?
It's like it's literally like
injecting
the
you with
Yeah.
Damn, Bram Stoker had it right.
Yeah, and how it makes you kind of like sickly and like you're infected by this,
pale, dead.
Yeah, it's really cool. Pieces like that are really interesting, and I also really like pieces where they just kind of come to you through like living through your daily life. Like the other day I was thinking, because basically at the moment I'm living in Marston, right, which is a place in Oxford, and I walk through Marston Cycle Path, which is like massive fields basically, and there's this like really tiny waterfall. It's calling it a waterfall is like so generous. It's like a little dip.
Trickle.
Yeah, where it trickles down.
Yeah.
And there's like a rock next to the waterfall, and every morning when I pass this little bit of the walk, there's a heron like perched on that stone, right? And then it disappears because I walk the same way back, just in the opposite direction, obviously, and like it's not there anymore. And I'm just thinking, like, what is this heron's day looking like? Like, what is the day in the life of this heron? And then that just made me think, like, maybe I could do a piece where I pick like 3 animals that I see on my walk every day to biochem and like research their like behavioral patterns and like why I see them like at certain points on my walk every morning. You know, stuff like that.
I love that so much.
Thank you.
I think that's lovely. Because again, it's that kind of relatable thing in the way, it's kind of like bird watching in a sense, because it's like, it's a very kind of almost calming, like a daily kind of part of your routine or habit, and you see these animals, but then you're looking at it through that scientific lens. So like in bird watching, you're obviously like, I've seen these species, But then, I love that. Yeah. I think that's lovely.
And then it flooded, and the rock got covered, and I stopped seeing the heron, and I was like, where did the heron go instead? Like how is the climate affecting this?
But
heron?
isn't that really interesting? Because it's like, the heron has a routine.
Exactly, like us, you know? I think it's so interesting.
And I think that's crazy. I read an article earlier while I was waiting for my stuff to thaw about chimpanzees like reacting to doing a particular task. And the kind of idea was that they performed better at the task when there was people watching.
Oh, interesting.
And I thought that was really cool.
They can perceive us and that influences that.
And it's that kind of thing of like, you know, if you're doing something, and it was kind of at the really hard tasks, when there was more people there, they did really well, but this kind of easier tasks, when there was less people there, they did well. And I'm not gonna lie, but I really relate to that.
Yeah, that's me.
In the way of like, if it's a really simple task, it's like, I want nobody here because I'm gonna embarrass myself if it goes wrong. Whereas if it's really hard and I'm like, yeah, you know what, I can do this, like witnesses, and you're like, I'm gonna do so well because these guys are gonna see me do well. I don't know, I think it's really interesting. And there's another like chimpanzee one as well. I'm really into this kind of animal behaviour because I'm very kind of, I'm quite a generally like nostalgic, reminiscent kind of person, as we know. So I find kind of real value in these things of like, they're exactly like us. I think like that heron thing is like, that's crazy because, you know, it's so, you don't relate yourself to this bird, but you're a lot more similar than you think. And yeah, this other chimpanzee one was like, they have kind of like, what's the word? Kind of damage management skills. That's not the right phrase, but like damage control skills, in the way that they can like look forward and see like what's going to be the best thing to do. So like there's this funnel above like a moving platform with food on. We'll say an apple for argument's sake. And a rock was going to fall on it if they didn't steady it. But then there was 2 platforms, and they introduced like 2 tubes. And most of the chimpanzees steadied both of them because it was like, oh, both rocks are going to fall. It was just really cool. And I know it sounds like silly almost because it sounds like such a simple thing. It's like, well, of course they're going to... But it's like the experimental setup's so like, you know, we know like there's going to be so many controls and that and whatever. I just find it so fascinating. That's why I love things like Planet of the Apes, because I'm like, you know, it's just really cool.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Like documentaries and stuff. It's like a great like. My Octopus Teacher is a wonderful film. Like, it is so good. Everybody go watch that film straight after you listen to this.
I haven't actually seen it.
It's so good. It made me sob, and it was literally just about an octopus living its day-to-day life. But this I won't spoil it, but this man, a researcher, is following this one specific octopus and develops this like really strong connection with this octopus, and you can tell that the octopus, because octopuses are like insanely intelligent, right? And you can just tell that this octopus like kind of feels the connection back to the researcher, and then something really sad happens at the end.
Oh no, don't! I can imagine what happens. To be honest with you.
It's really sad. But But yeah, it's really good. And like David Attenborough, obviously, like stuff like that, just amazing.
Well, yeah,
Wonderful.
I mean, Blue Planet and all that. It's
Blue Planet and all that.
and all that jazz. Because it's again, it's making science accessible, and it's also so much easier to watch or listen to something than to read something.
Yeah,
because it's kind of just there in the background, if anything. And with things like podcasts as well, like I listened to a podcast called The Life Scientific, which it's really good.
I think
Alongside like talking to scientists about their work in a very accessible way, it just talks to them about their life and kind of, and again, it's that thing of like, these are real people.
Yeah.
There's like, you know, the odd case where people say, oh yeah, I got like a second class, or like, you know, didn't finish university, and now they're like head professor of whatever. And I love that, and you know, all the nuances and different people's stories, whether they were like, you know, white male British or from, you know, international or women or you know, whatever. And it was just really kind of, it's nice to hear the story behind this really impressive person, because it makes them seem so much more human.
Yeah.
One of our kind of lecturers was on one of them, which I listened to.
Yeah.
Alison.
Oh, yeah, I thought so.
It was great.
We've got Alison to be on one of our panels. Oxide panel next.
Really?
Oxide X Sharrington Society. It's mostly run by Sharrington, to be fair, but like, because it's Catherine's president of Sharrington.
Yeah.
So we've got Alison.
Amazing lady. Amazing lady.
She did some of the Christmas lectures.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's very cool. Yeah.
No, she's very cool. Yeah, we get to meet a lot of cool people here.
Yeah.
Which
Definitely.
I think we're lucky.
Very lucky.
For.
Yeah.
Well, do you have a favourite like fun science kind of like TV show or like
TV?
documentary or podcasty thing? Recommendations.
I'd say mine's an author.
Go on.
I think. But I love Nick Lane.
Yes. Okay. Cool.
He wrote, like, the one that comes to mind is Power, Sex and Suicide.
Yeah.
Which was so good. I read it, I like talked about it in my personal statement, and I'm
Did
remembering.
you?
Yeah, I did. It was like the opening sentence, or like in the first few sentences of my personal statement. But that one comes to mind straight away because some people in my lab, the postdocs, they went to some sort of seminar or conference or something. This is so Oxford, but like Nick Lane was just sat 2 seats down from them. So they went over and said hi, got his email, and like had a coffee and everything, which I would simply die, I think.
And they're just people.
They're just people. He just wanted a coffee. Like,
me too, babes.
like me too, mate.
Oh god, that's so cool.
But yeah, he is, yeah, definitely like,
Up there.
if I have one life goal that still feels unachievable, I feel like at this point in my life, like a lot of things are starting to feel a bit more achievable. Like being a researcher, or like, I don't know, like giving a TED talk, like stuff like that. They feel more achievable. But like one thing that still feels unachievable to me is like writing my own science book, like popular science book. Yeah. I would love to do that, and I feel like he's one of the reasons why I would love to do that. So yeah, I'd definitely say go read a Nick Lane book.
What would it be about?
I don't know. I feel like there's too much.
You feel like you're not quite like...
No
yet,
idea has developed yet. But like I feel like there's almost just like too many things I could write about that like I would need to like properly narrow it down. Like definitely a lot of things that feel interesting are to do with like being queer or like gender identity, stuff like that. That would be really cool to write about.
That would
I think.
be cool, yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing. But
nice.
we'll see.
We will see.
The world is my oyster.
And I will be right there, ready to buy it.
Ready to read.
Pre-order.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I do love a science book.
Yeah.
A popular science book. It's again that accessibility. And yeah, I love like writing science and that kind of intertwining between culture, society and science as well.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about the political stuff briefly, but the kind of like I did a longer form piece like ages ago, which is on the Substack, but about like aging and beauty, but from a very scientific perspective. You know, talk about like cybernetics and all that jazz.
Aging is very interesting. Yeah.
But also from like a cultural perspective in the way of like, why do we see aging as bad, quote unquote, and that sort of thing, and the value of beauty and things. And I guess one of the things I really like about having that scientific knowledge is that it gives me a different perspective.
Yeah.
And it kind of allows me to access all these different types of arguments and yeah, I don't know. So I feel like science, for me, you know, I was tossing between like science and English lit and all that jazz, and I think that by studying science, it's opened up much more that maybe doing English lit wouldn't have. Obviously, I can't know that.
Yeah.
But I think science is...
It's a can of worms.
Yeah. And I think inherently it's more of a... If you want to go into depth, it's something that has to be taught.
Yeah.
Whereas English, while obviously discussion and that, and then say for example at university level does add value, I can still enjoy like a novel or whatever without having to kind of analyse it.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, like I love analysing a novel. I genuinely do it anyway, because I'm just weird. But I don't know. I think the depth of science is like a very taught thing.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I don't know how I would have accessed this information
Yes.
without doing a degree. Like in the same way that, or in a very different way to how there is obviously academic value in studying English lit, for example. But if you want to just surface level enjoy a book, you're completely like able to do that without study. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So true.
So true. But yeah, I think... What time are we on? Okay. Have you got any final I mean, my podcast always goes this way, right? I kind of start off with kind of an idea, and then I'm like, we end up in all different areas, and we jump around topics and whatever.
I love it.
Because that's how how my brain works, and this is my brain.
Yeah.
So, yeah, have you got any final, like, little things that you want to say? Or propose, or just,
I think I should start a science podcast and you should come on my podcast.
I would love that. That's the next step. That's
I so
EIC to science podcast.
I so would.
I could see you at the Substack, to be fair.
I don't think I would have it in me to have to like write often enough. But I could so yap often enough to have a podcast. Yeah. I think like I'm definitely more geared towards this kind of science communication than like writing.
Yeah.
So I guess my final thought would be there's more to academia than like writing about it. Like writing about it is a very cool way of sharing, but if you just want to talk about it as well, that's like still adding to the conversation.
Yeah, there's massive value in just discussing things.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it's undervalued in the way that like you feel like maybe you should always be like making everything very solid and But the only way that you can broaden your horizons is by talking to other people.
Exactly.
And I think that's really important. And I would love your podcast. I think it would be great.
Yay.
You'd be a great host.
Thank you.
How would you go on?
You've been a great host.
Thank you. I bumble my way through permanently. How would you open? What would your opening line be?
Of my podcast.
Yeah, go on. Welcome to the what podcast?
Welcome to Yap with Yaks, where we talk about science.
I like that.
Yeah. That's the prototype. We'll develop it.
Yeah.
We'll sharpen it up.
Yeah.
And then it can become a jingle.
Love.
You know?
To be fair.
I think Yap with Yaks is pretty good.
Yeah, because yap's a protein as well.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yap Taz.
Yeah.
Yap
Taz.
Yap Taz.
Is that like hedgehog or like wind
Yeah, it's wind signalling, I think.
Yeah.
Or like hippo. Isn't it hippo?
Oh, is it hippo?
I think it's hippo signalling.
Liv.
We know.
We're going off.
That's it. We've gone
Hedgehogs
too
and
far.
hippos, yeah.
Yeah, why are they called?
I also love that about science, like really rogue names.
My
that they give
favourite one
proteins.
is the wee one. The fact that it was discovered in Scotland and they were like, oh, it makes the oocyte tiny, let's call it wee.
Wee.
It's so funny. I love it.
There's also the, oh god, what's the one? It's like in flies, it's the caspase inhibitor, but it's like,
oh my god, it's like,
there's like Diablo, which I love.
There's Diablo, there's like Grim, there's Reaper and Grim
and Reaper. Oh my god.
I think there's like Sight or like something like that as well. It's so good.
Classic.
And the way they just call
Charles Dickens could never.
I think it's like TLRs or something, like the intracellular domain that like detaches to do inflammation. They just call them like dead domains, like so true.
Dead domains.
Like yeah, they do just die, dead for real.
Me too.
Like same.
I am permanently a dead domain.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, let's see. This is what happens. Yeah. I go off topic. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me. We're hitting the gorgeous 1 hour slot. And obviously I'll be editing stuff. And let me know if you want to cut anything out or like, you know, upon reflection of done before. You know, I listen back and I'm like, you're talking shit, I'll cut it out. But yes, you were a very good guest.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very eloquent.
It's been very fun.
So yeah, we'll have to do it again.
Yeah, for sure.
If you would like to, if I've not been too
I have many thoughts.
awful.
I would love to yap with Yax. No, you yap with Yax.
Yes. Okay. But yeah, thank you everyone for listening. I'm going to give a shout out to Rebecca because I know you listen to the episodes regularly, which is very nice.
Go Rebecca.
And yeah, I always say I will see you next time. It's like, well, I won't see you, will I?
You'll hear us next time.
You will hear me next time.
Yeah,
and yeah, hope you enjoyed it. And what do I say? Have a good week and let's keep talking.